Its towering skyline and world-leading technology make New York the ultimate city of the future. Yet breathtaking new discoveries unveil that the blueprints for this mega metropolis were laid thousands of years ago. From brutal blood sports staged in ancient Madison Square Gardens to Times Square celebrations at a gigantic Neolithic calendar, you are about to discover that everything you thought you knew about the Big Apple, in fact, comes from our distant forefathers. This is the extraordinary story of ancient New York. New York is a city of miracles that reaches for the sky. The Empire State Building, Wall Street, Times Square. America begins its year according to New York. The world counts its money according to Wall Street's ebbs and flows. An area smaller than 20 sports stadiums projects its influence and culture all across the globe. Are these wonders of the modern world, or is it possible that the same discoveries were made in our distant past? Incredible new discoveries reveal that New York's most celebrated features were actually invented by the ancient city builders before becoming lost to time.
If you look at the big cities of the ancient world, at Athens, at Rome, at Alexandria, at Babylon, these were extraordinary places. They were places that people talked about that were kind of legendary in their own lifetime.
We have uncovered proof of ancient city streets that were lined with movie theaters 2,000 years before Steven Spielberg. Giant stadiums with retractable roofs. Secret underground passageways that brought life to millions. The truth may rewrite the story of how man went from living in ancient settlements to the greatest city on Earth.
Whatever their problems, cities are where people want to be. People still come to cities like magnets. Once that started, once civilization as we know it has begun, there is absolutely no turning back.
Every capital city in the ancient world needed a monument, an amazing structure that would unify the citizens and cement the city's identity. In New York, that monument is the Statue of Liberty, which has greeted immigrants sailing in from the New World since 1886.
For Americans, Statue of Liberty symbolizes freedom. Probably for the world, it symbolizes freedom.
But amazingly, it might not be with us today were it not for an ingenious secret of engineering buried within the ruins of antiquity's greatest city structure. According to legend, the Greek island of Rhodes was home in the 4th century BC to one of the fabled 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Colossus of Rhodes. This towering monument soared 110 feet up into the heavens, just 40 feet shy of the New York statue's peak. Its hands measured 13 feet long, and it weighed more than 225 tons. At the city of Rhodes, nothing remains of the original Colossus. Why did it disappear? And how could its mysterious demise be helping the Statue of Liberty to survive today? Piecing together clues from 2,300-year-old bronze fragments and ancient engineering manuals, we set out to piece together the riddle of the Rhodes Colossus destruction. Our investigation begins over 300 years before the birth of Christ, when Rhodes was engulfed by a giant sieging army led by the general Demetrius Policetes. At its head was a siege structure over 140 feet high called a Helepolis, which in ancient Greek means taker of cities. The citizens of Rhodes were successful in resisting Demetrius, and the siege was abandoned after a year, leaving behind the mighty Helepolis.
He came in 305, and by 304 he had not managed to take the city despite having used the most advanced techniques and most sophisticated siege machines of antiquity.
In celebration of their victory, the people erected the Colossus of Rhodes as thanks to the sun god Helios. and they used Demetrius's giant Taker of Cities siege machine to create a building technique far in advance of its time: ancient scaffolding. The siege machine's towering 9-story frame was used to support teams of workers who built stone columns in the figure's inner core.
Theory has it that the Colossus of Rhodes was constructed with ancient materials. They were more using masonry back then, so they used masonry for probably the 2 legs, so they created columns, which is something the Greeks were very good at. So it was very good in compression, and it could hold the weight of a structure, but at some point they had to add iron to it and then develop the skin on the iron, very similar to the Statue of Liberty.
Over 2,000 years after the stunning Colossus was created, the best physical clue in existence regarding its mysteries is the Statue of Liberty. Just as the Colossus symbolized unity and victory for ancient Rhodes, so does the Statue of Liberty for people of modern America. And the direct link of the Statue of Liberty to the Rhodes Colossus can be traced through the man who designed it: French architect Auguste Bartholdi.
Auguste Bartholdi, who designed the statue, studied the classical art of the period. As a student, he learned about the works of the great Greek and Roman architects. And that took him soon to Egypt, where he began to study the colossal statues of there, including the Colossi of Memnon. But the Colossus of Rhodes really attracted him because he was interested in gigantic, monumental statuary. He was obsessed by it. So he was very much determined to bring out of the past of antiquity into the modern world a modern Colossus.
Architect Glenn Leach has spent a lifetime studying the Statue of Liberty's structure. He was brought in after the attacks of September the 11th to re-examine the statue's security measures and to do what the ancients couldn't, to ensure his city monument survives the test of time.
The Statue of Liberty has always had a special place in my heart. I grew up on Staten Island, and I saw the Statue of Liberty hundreds of times taking the ferry, and the fact that I worked on the Statue of Liberty and helped modernize it and take it into the 21st century was a wonderful treat for me, and something I'll always be pretty proud of.
Over the course of his examination of the New York statue, Glenn has begun unraveling the unerring engineering parallels between these two city monuments.
There's a lot of comparisons between the Colossus and the modern Colossus, the Statue of Liberty. I think the big one is their location. They both sat on prominent waterfronts at their time. At both of their times, they were the largest structures that existed.
Glenn has used all his knowledge of the Statue of Liberty to unravel how the Colossus of Rhodes would have looked 23 centuries ago.
The copper has aged over time, what they call noble rust. And the noble rust color is actually that green patina that we see in the statue. Where in the Colossus, they say that the bronze remained shiny, which would have been a pretty amazing structure to see a bronze shiny statue.
Building the Colossus of Rhodes was a phenomenal achievement. Thousands of workers took over 12 years to complete a project that would cost an estimated $3 billion in today's money. Yet the ancient records reveal that this stunning monument only survived in historical terms for the blink of an eye.
So unfortunately, after only 52 years, the Colossus of Rhodes failed and buckled at its knees because of an earthquake.
Rhodes' tragic disaster has terrifying parallels with modern New York. For the Big Apple lies at a crossroads of several giant tectonic fault lines. Experts predict that one day a major quake could cause catastrophic damage. The Statue of Liberty would come crashing into the harbor. But engineers learned from the collapse of the Rhodes Colossus and made a crucial alteration to the surface structure of the Statue of Liberty.
This is a model of what the skin may have looked like. It's shown as acrylic, but this was actually the copper skin held by an iron bar that was formed to the shape of each piece of skin in the statue. It was allowed to move back and forth, which gave the whole statue flexibility and allowed it to move during wind.
The Statue of Liberty is thus able to bend in the wind up to 5 inches in any direction. This ingenious design feature could save the statue from suffering a similar fate as the ancient Colossus.
The Statue of Liberty is built around a box truss within the structure. So it's a long truss that sits on top of the pedestal, but is grounded within the pedestal, which actually makes it taller and more stable, almost like putting a stick into the sand so that there's more structure underneath. The pedestal acts more like a footing so that the statue has much more strength.
The legacy of the Rhodes Colossus lives not just in New York's greatest monument, but in every modern skyscraper and every modern city.
Symbolic images are important to a lot of cities. If you look at Rhodes, it had its Colossus. New York had its Statue of Liberty. I think it's a really important part of any great city is to have a symbol.
But beyond the phenomenal grandeur and ambition of the ancient city builders was a far more fundamental challenge: survival. How did a secret tunnel bored over half a mile through a mountain save an ancient city from dehydration and death? New York is a thriving metropolis of over 9 million people. The city acts as a magnet, drawing people from all over the world into one giant melting pot. At its heart is Manhattan, an island that for over 300 years has struggled with one critical challenge: how to provide all its people with enough water. To supply New York with water into the future, the city has launched its greatest ever engineering project, the New York City Water Tunnel. A $6 billion project built with ground-penetrating radar and mobile drilling factories. The ancients had none of this when creating an urban water tunnel of their own. The question is, how? On the island of Samos in the Aegean Sea lie the ruins of a once great city with uncanny parallels to Manhattan Island. 2,500 years ago, it had plumbing, baths, and sewage facilities like any modern city. But like Manhattan, although it was surrounded by water, producing enough fresh water for the city's people was a massive challenge.
In Samos, you have a particularly mind-bending problem, that you have a thriving, busy, highly populated city, you've got a fantastic water spring, and you've got a mountain in between the two. But what the Samians do is very, very clever and extremely ambitious. They decide that they're not going to go round the mountain. What they're going to aim to do is to bore a channel through the heart of the mountain itself.
They built a gigantic tunnel stretching over half a mile underground, and they called it the Tunnel of Eupalinos. This was a project of staggering ambition, for the ancient Greeks built the Tunnel of Eupalinos in the same way that modern engineers are building the New York City water tunnel, by digging from both ends at the same time.
They have decided to dig from both sides simultaneously to show that they can defeat the mountain.
Unlike the modern New York engineers, the ancient Greeks' tunnel was painstakingly carved out by hand over 8 years. But after 400 yards of tunneling, they hit a problem that threatened to throw the project into disaster. The limestone rock was fragile and liable to collapse.
And this was a very, very difficult moment. First of all, they were in complete dark. They have the consolation of seeing the light of the entrance. Second, they were unable to know where they were finding themselves.
The tunnelers on the north side were forced to change course. To make the meeting point now would require extraordinarily accurate calculations. While New York's engineers had state-of-the-art 3D mapping technology, its towering skyline and world-leading technology make New York the ultimate city of the future. Yet breathtaking new discoveries unveil that the blueprints for this mega metropolis were laid thousands of years ago. From brutal blood sports staged in ancient Madison Square Gardens to Times Square, smaller than 20 sports stadiums, projects its influence and culture all across the globe. Are these wonders of the modern world, or is it possible that the same discoveries were made in our distant past? Incredible new discoveries reveal that New York's most celebrated features were actually invented by the ancient city builders before becoming lost to time.
If you look at the big cities of the ancient world, at Athens, at Rome, at Alexandria, at Babylon, these were extraordinary places. They were places that people talked about, that were kind of legendary in their own lifetime.
We have uncovered proof of ancient city square celebrations at a gigantic Neolithic calendar. You are about to discover that everything you thought you knew about the Big Apple, in fact, comes from our distant forefathers. This is the extraordinary story of ancient New York. New York is a city of miracles that reaches for the sky. The Empire State Building, Wall Street, Times Square. America begins its year according to New York. The world counts its money according to Wall Street's ebbs and flows. An area